Luciano Oliveira, Oliveira Lawyers. Today is Wednesday, July the 16th, 12:30 Rio de Janeiro time. We are starting one more live stream. And as usual, let's get started by checking the news here in Brazil. So this time we're not gonna check UOL. We're gonna check Estadão. All right, Estadão is another major Brazilian newspaper that nowadays, pretty much like any other newspaper, has a substantial presence online. So let's take a look at the headlines. And the main headline is about the ongoing dispute between Brazil and the United States, or better saying, between President Lula and President Trump, in terms of ideological issues and trade as well. So let's take a look at the headline. The headline here says the President Lula administration is demanding an answer about negotiating, and it is expressing indignation regarding the new tariffs in a letter sent to President Donald Trump, right? So, for those of you who don't know, like there are, different issues going on between the United States and Brazil. Some of them are ideological. There is a criminal lawsuit. There is a charge, or there are multiple charges against President Bolsonaro, and President Trump is saying that President Bolsonaro is being wrongfully persecuted, right, because of political motivations. Okay, it is something very similar to what you saw happening in the United States. And naturally, here we're not going to take one side or another, but the situation is very interesting because it does resemble exactly what happened to President Donald Trump in the United States, right? So I will try to put it in a kind of neutral or balanced way. There were charges against President Donald Trump, and he went to court, and eventually, like he won, like the presidency of the United States, right? So with President Bolsonaro, it's a kind of similar situation. There are charges against him, and right now he's the favorite to win the 2026 election. And a part of the Brazilian society, they believe that all the persecution of President Bolsonaro intends to remove President Bolsonaro from the dispute and allow President Lula to continue in power. So there is, that's what you see, like most of the day as a headline, not only in Estadão, but UOL, the one that we've been sharing with you typically here at the live stream. And that's a big topic because, like the tariffs imposed by the United States can and would hurt the Brazilian economy big time. And to be honest with you, like the economy is not really in great shape. So the Lula administration is very concerned with the tariffs. And interesting enough, like they are taking advantage of this dispute to increase President Lula's popularity in Brazil, which was quite low before this event. But now, with this, fight going on with President Trump, Lula is framing like, he's a real, a truthful representative of the Brazilian people. And it looks like, this strategy is succeeding because, his popularity, which was really, really low, is growing up by the day. Okay, so very interesting, turn of events when you think about this, right? Like, I mean, there was an unintended effect, I'm sure, when Trump, took side of President Bolsonaro against President Lula. But there you go. Let's check if we have any of our Friends already here with suggestions of topics for us to discuss. We have a Mark. All right, let's see what Mark says. Mark, boa tarde, senhor Luciano. Boa tarde, Mark. Good to see you over here. What happens if I don't vote once I receive the Brazilian citizenship and passport? And is it every 4 years, please? Yes, Mark. So if you receive the Brazilian, citizenship, it will depend on whether you are living in Brazil or not. If you're living in Brazil, you have to vote not only for the presidential elections, but naturally for other elections as well. For governor, for for the Brazilian Congress, for mayor and other things, and all of them, they are mandatory, which is very interesting, right, from a U.S. citizen perspective, because in the U.S. You have the privilege of voting, but you don't have the obligation to do so. So in Brazil, it's like an obligation, right? Like, I mean, you don't have like this plan B. However, if you don't vote, typically nothing too bad is going to happen to you. Typically, you're going to receive a fine, a really tiny fine. Is typically, under, is typically of a few dollars per election. And eventually, when you try to use like a government provided service or something like this, and if they see that you're not voting, they're going to say, you know what, we're not going to provide you the service. For instance, if you apply for a passport and you're not voting, they're going to say, well, you're not going to get a passport because you haven't voted, right? And what you're going to do in this type of scenario, it would be to pay the fine. And once you pay the fines, you're back to regular status, and then you're going to get a passport, right? So that's very interesting. Now, for some reason, even though the penalties, they are very, very low from a financial perspective, Brazilians, they kind of incorporate this obligation in their heads, and they feel bad. Like, I mean, if they don't go voting, they're going to feel bad, about themselves. So, even though there is pretty much, little to no consequences to skip voting, Brazilians who are, at least in Brazil, they are going to very consistently go out there to vote. Okay, and before you think, it is for a very altruistic kind of reason. I don't think so. Many Brazilians, maybe probably just like in the US and other countries, a good share of the population doesn't feel good about politicians, and they don't really think their individual votes will matter, and they go more because of the sense of obligation than commitment, to maybe improve the election system. And of course, I agree that ideally everybody would do their part. But I also understand those who are very frustrated because the level of corruption, right, in Brazilian politics is like, a very, very high, particularly if you compare to something like the United States, right? Like in the United States, things are so far from perfect, right? I think everybody is going to agree. But when you try to compare things, right, like you're going to see that, there is a huge distance from the problems that you see in the United States in terms of corruption, in terms of bad political behavior. And again, I can tell. I always see the news, the headlines in New York Times, Wall Street Journal. I know there is a lot of bad stuff that happens in the US as well. But again, when you compare to Brazil, I think that in Brazil, things are going to be more serious, from like this kind of commitment of politicians to the population, right? So, if you think about numbers, about percentage of crimes committed by politicians or the types of crimes, I think that the Brazilian situation, unfortunately, it is much worse than what you see in the United States. All right. So going back to Mark, maybe a last piece of my answer to Mark is that now, if you go live in the United States, then typically you're going to be required to vote only for the federal government election, meaning the presidential elections, which is going to be like every 4 years, and then you can actually go vote through for the consulate in charge of your jurisdiction, in charge of your state, or the place where you live in the United States. All right, Mark. Oliuni, boa tarde. Greetings from Portugal. Hey, Oliuni, so good to see you over here. Always good to hear from Oliuni. I hope you're enjoying Portugal. Where you are in Portugal, Oliuni? Is it Lisbon, Porto, Algarve? Let us know where you are. Marisa Navas, two Portuguese participants in a row. So, Oliuni em Portugal, Marisa Navas, boa tarde. Já estamos na expectativa da sua live. And then you can see the Portuguese flag, right, Oliuni? So, Oliuni and Marisa and Ricardo. I'm not sure if Marisa is with Ricardo right now, but at least Marisa and Oliuni, they are both in Portugal. Look at that. That's so cool. Yui, how's it going, Yui? It has been a while. Boa tarde. During the 1 year period after marriage, do we have to stay continuously for 1 year, or can we go outside? What if we have some kind of surgery to be done abroad? Can we show that to be out, right? So let me explain Yui's question. For those of you who don't know about the citizenship path, so let's say if you marry a Brazilian national, after you secure, so you marry the Brazilian national, and then you need to apply for permanent residency, okay? And then after 1 year of permanent residency, you can apply for Brazilian citizenship, okay? So this is a distinction that is not like. Known, I would say, by most foreign citizens. They assume it that just because they marry a Brazilian national, they are going to qualify for citizenship. And it's not actually the marriage to the Brazilian national is going to be actually the fact that you've been living in Brazil for a certain period of time, right? So consistently in Brazil, the path for you to secure citizenship is going to be permanent residency. Okay, so even if you don't marry any Brazilians, if you live in Brazil for a certain period of time under permanent residency, then you're going to qualify, you're going to be allowed to apply for the Brazilian citizenship. Don't forget, there is also the requirement that you speak, write, understand, advanced Portuguese. Okay, so even though when you marry a Brazilian national, you can qualify for citizenship under just a single year, the learning component in our experience is going to take substantially longer than a year. I'm always excited when I have my consultations with our clients and they say, well, I'm very good at languages. I'm going to learn Portuguese in a single year. And I like their confidence, but in our experience, typically is going to take longer than a year, right? Like, I mean, the Portuguese language, we have a bunch of, grammar rules that you would not see in English, for instance, right? Like we have masculine and feminine words, right? So for us, like words have a gender, right? So that's just another challenge on top of everything else. We also have, the way we conjugate verbs is typically more complex than what you see in English, okay? And then you have a vocabulary, you have other stuff, so not an easy thing to accomplish, to, achieve proficiency level of Portuguese for you to qualify for the Brazilian citizenship. But going back to Yuri's question, Yuri, so you are allowed typically, right? And then I'm just like, reading the law. This is not like a consultation, which we're not supposed to do that. I'm mostly just, sharing major guidelines, which are just out there for anyone to find. Okay, so uh, you can read in the Brazilian law of immigration that you are allowed, in theory, to stay outside of the country for up to 3 months. Okay, so you do need to be a permanent residency in Brazil for 1 year, meaning you're gonna get your resident number, the RNM number. Once you get the number and it says, prazo indeterminado or undetermined timeline, that's a funky way of saying permanent. So once you secure the resident number under the permanent residency, you need to wait for a full year, right? And then within this full year, in theory, you would have 3 months to leave Brazil, right? It could be a single trip of, let's say, 2 months and 29 days. It could be two trips of 45 days. It could be three trips of 30 days. However, in our recommendation, we never tell you, go out there and stay for up to 3 months, because we know life happens. Sometimes you are, keeping track of those days, and then in the last time you travel abroad, you exceeded the days for some emergency. And then if you exceed, there is no going back. Like you burned, like you lost the time window to apply within that year, right? So my recommendation, or our recommendation, is for you to not travel at all if possible. Now, yes, if you have an emergency, if you need, to go back to another country for some, family type of situation, some type of emergency, just make sure that you go and you come back to Brazil as fast as possible. Don't rely on the 3 months timeline, because we see that happening time after time. People mess up, right? And then, once they mess up, guess what? They still want to pursue the thing. They want to sue the Brazilian government. They want to find an exception. They want to find a reason, an explanation. So trying to avoid those problems in the first place, right? Understand that achieving, a citizenship, to obtain a new citizenship is a very big deal. So, Yuri, my recommendation, yes, if you have an emergency, you can go, but come back as soon as possible. Try not to exceed a total of 30 days within this 1 year. All right? Michael, Jean, Luciano, I am in your city. I am in Sao Paulo. All right, Michael, so good to know. And are you in Sao Paulo for vacation? Are you in Sao Paulo for business? Let us know, Michael, what you're doing. Yes, Sao Paulo is my city of birth, even though nowadays I spend more time in either Rio de Janeiro, right? Most of my time in Brazil I spend in either Rio de Janeiro or Fortaleza, right? Not so much in São Paulo. I am in São Paulo every now and then, but I am originally from São Paulo, right? So very interesting for those of you who don't know, like we have a very strong regional accent, right? So, the São Paulo accent is very distinctive. Maybe something like, New York accent, right? And then in Rio de Janeiro, we have a completely different accent. Maybe we could, say that it is like the California one, just for the sake of differentiating. But yes, my accent is still from São Paulo, even though I spend most of the time in either Rio de Janeiro or Fortaleza. But let us know, Michael, how is your trip in São Paulo going? What's going on with you? Bill, so good to see you. Oi, Luciano, you're looking good this morning. Hope you're doing well. Thank you, Bill. Thank you so much for your support. Bill is always with us. Bill has very interesting, contributions and questions, and he's always, supporting the channel. Thank you so much, Bill. Ari, boa tarde, Luciano. Good to see you. Good to see you as well, Ari. Brazilian residency permits, which of the following without extra paperwork: full-time, part-time employment, unpaid volunteering, postgraduate study. Okay, question: Brazilian residency permits which of the following without extra paperwork, right? So you're probably asking like, if I achieve the residency, right? What type of stuff can I do with my residency? So the residency, Ari, is not gonna be just a single one, right? Like the residency could be under different tracks, and whenever you see the RNM card, right? Let me show you the RNM card over here. Right. So this is the RNM card, Ari. And on the back of this card, the residency is going to state under which track it was granted, right? So, for instance, if you secure the residency, right, and this is going to show on your resident card under the digital nomad track, this is going to be one type of residency. Okay. Now, if you get the residency under the real estate investor track, it's going to be a different type of residency. If you get a residency based on either marriage or childbirth in Brazil, it's going to be a different type. So each residency is going to have different requirements and different, let's say, allowances, if you will, in terms of what you can do. Okay. And they are not very clearly articulated by the Brazilian government. All right. So many questions that we get here at the firm, they assume, there is some source of material saying exactly what you can do under each track of the residency. But that's not how immigration law generally works. That's the same thing we see in Portugal, for instance, right? In the United States, however, it is a little bit better differentiated, uh, uh, particularly because of the concern that the U.S. government has about people coming for investment and working instead, or people coming for tourism and then becoming a full-time worker. So the U.S. does have those things kind of specified in a clear manner. We don't have it that in Brazil. So in Brazil, what we do is like we assume, we have our own assumptions based on our own articulation of the law. Okay, and very interesting, even when we reach out to the Brazilian immigration, their answer is going to be vague, right? They're going to say, well, this is going to be addressed by the Ministry of Work, right? Basically, they're saying, well, I don't know, but go ask them, right? And then if you ask the Ministry of Work, guess what? They're going to send you elsewhere and so on. But the articulation we do here, Ari, is that if you are securing anything other than the permanent residency, right? The permanent residency, you should not be allowed to work, and you should not be allowed to be the legal representative for a business entity in Brazil. Okay. So part-time, or full-time employment, typically you're not going to be able to do it until you secure the permanent residency. All right. Now, any type of study you're going to be welcome to do. As soon as you get the residency, you are free to study. And for this type of activity, it could be a digital nomad, residency. It could be real estate investor residency, and so on. For volunteering, this is a tricky question because we have a specific track for volunteering. We typically understand that you cannot volunteer unless you have the permanent residency. Okay, Ari? But this is like a conservative interpretation. I can tell you that, like many people, they are not going to follow this kind of interpretation, particularly in Brazil, because, the system, like immigration and everything else, is more accommodating, if you will. But what I told you here, it's our interpretation in terms of how residency is going to relate to allowing you to do those things or not. Let me know if you have a follow-up question, Ari. Ahmed, good to see you, Ahmed. Ahmed, the son. Yui, which accent is the one similar to the Queen's British English? Yeah, I mean, that's a very interesting question, Yui. I would say, typically because Brazil or because São Paulo dominates like the remaining of the country from an economical perspective, a pure São Paulo accent is going to be welcome, anywhere you go. I think there is no way for you to deny that. Like if you go, like to not so developed parts of the country, like the Northeast and the North, like when you have an accent from Sao Paulo, people are going to notice, and typically they're going to expect, something different from you, or they're going to give you more leeway, but this is something, that we see like in the United States. If someone shows up with a British accent, right? Like, I mean, there is a certain expectation, maybe, right? Like, I mean, that's the impression I have. That's an interesting question. Ahmed, how long does it take the PR to get approved, the permanent residency? Ahmed, so there again, like we were saying, there are different types of residencies. The PR, right, typically means permanent residency. And for you to acquire the permanent residency, it depends on how you're going to acquire, right? Like, are you marrying a Brazilian national, right? Are you giving birth in Brazil? Or are you buying real estate? So those things, they are going to have a different timelines, okay? But just to illustrate how they are going to substantially differ from each other, for real estate, first you're going to get a temporary 4 years, and after these 4 years, that's when you actually migrate to the permanent residency. Okay, so by buying property, maybe you have 6 months between starting to see properties, buying the property, getting the title, applying for the real estate investor track, and eventually getting it. So just right there is like 6 months, and then you're going to have 4 years that you're going to have of this is going to be temporary residency because it's good for just 4 years. And then before, not after the 4 years, like before the 4 years, like 60 days before the expiration of your temporary residency, that's when you're going to apply for the renewal of your residency. And this time is going to be renewed as a permanent residency. Okay, so just right there, you can see how long it's going to take you from beginning to securing the permanent residency. Okay, now, if you marry a Brazilian national, timeline it changes substantially. Typically here at the firm, it would take more or less like a couple of months before this couple moves from abroad to Brazil. We start working when they are still abroad, like a couple of months. Once they move to Brazil, typically we work for an additional couple of months. And then during this 4 month period of time, that's typically enough for the foreign citizen to secure the permanent residency. And again, very interesting because in the past, Brazil would say permanent residency. The current immigration framework avoids the term permanent residency and instead is going to say residency or residência por período indeterminado, right? Which means like it's a residency for an undetermined period of time. Is just like a funky way to avoid saying permanent, just because Brazil is concerned. Like if I tell you it's permanent and I try to take this away from you in the future, maybe I'm going to have a hard time because courts are going to say, well, you can give something permanent and then take this thing away. So because of the city distinction, Brazil is going to actually avoid the term permanent residency. But interesting enough, if you take a look at the tax code still articulates to this day, right? Like if you go to the Brazilian Revenue Service and you check, the rules for foreign citizens, they are still saying permanent residence. And they don't care, right? Like, I mean, and their take is like, listen, if you want to use funky language, weird language. We are not up to this game, and we're going to continue to use the permanent residency, right? So just that's another example of different ministries or different sectors of Brazil handling aspects of immigration in a different manner, right? And that's very typical of other countries, by the way, right? Maybe even in the United States, right? In the United States, you have different agencies who are articulating immigration concepts in a different way. All right. I hope that was helpful, Ahmed. Aaron, good to see you, Aaron. Are Lorenzetti shower heads generally unreliable or fragile? I came back to Brazil after 2 months abroad to a cold shower and rust clogged shower head. Is there a better brand? Aaron, so yeah, Lorenzetti, they are typically like a lower end type of shower head. One that is typically of a higher grade is going to be Deca, all right, DECA, Deca, okay, DECA, Deca shower heads, and they also have faucets. They have the knobs for your shower. Typically, they work with stainless steel. But Lorenzetti, like they are a lower end type of shower head, right? Very interesting, just because Aaron is making such an interesting question. In Brazil, we have something that was very unique. Nowadays, there are other countries using. We have a shower head that connects to power, and it's gonna, warm up the water that comes inside the shower head, right? So it's very interesting. I would say that probably the vast majority of Brazilian homes, they are gonna have this special type of shower head that is gonna warm up water, and an exception is going to be the other 10% who's going to have a boiler, like a dedicated boiler to warm up water and then send it throughout the home, right? But the vast majority of Brazilian houses, they are going to have the so-called Lorenzetti. Lorenzetti is almost, is of course is a brand name, but that's how we typically will refer to these shower heads that are going to warm up water while you're connected to electricity. And it does sound like a bad idea, right? Like, I mean, water and electricity in the same body. And yes, every now and then there is like, fire and people, get like, a shock and, they go to hospital. It is just part of our culture, right? Like, I mean, typically Brazilians, they don't even think about boilers. I would say most of the Brazilians, right? Like they don't even recognize like this style of warming water through a boiler because the electrical shower heads, they are so popular in Brazil. All right, Christopher. Boa tarde, Dr. Luciano. Boa tarde, Christopher. Glad to see over here. I know the real estate investor visa requirements can be met with multiple properties, correct? But do they all have to be purchased at the same time? Christopher, short answer, no, they don't need to be bought at the same time. Let's say that, let's assume you bought a property for 500,000 reais last year, and you just bought another property, this year, like in July of 2025. As long as both properties qualify for the real estate investor visa and you sent the money in a qualifying manner, yes, you could apply for the real estate investor visa, considering that both properties together would get you through the minimum requirement of 1 million reais in most of the country. Or remember, there is an exception for the Northeast and the North. Northeast and the North is going to be just 700,000 reais. Now, the warning that I do share to everyone who asks me this question, and this question is asked a lot, trust me, is that we don't know for how long the current dynamic or the current framework is going to remain. Because the only thing a constant in immigration law is changes, right? So immigration law means changes over time, like the federal government, either in Brazil, in the US, as you can probably tell, in Portugal, changing dramatically as we speak. The whole Europe, right? Like, I mean, they're trying to, wrap their arms around this crazy situation of, the massive influx of immigrants to Europe. So, my concern is that if you wait too long, Christopher, something is going to change, and if something changes, guess what? Your window of opportunity is going to be lost. Okay, so for people who ask me, all right, can I buy something now and something 5 years down the line? I say probably not, right? Like, I mean, I don't think 5 years down the line, the requirements are going to be the same. I don't even think we're going to have the real estate investor visa at least as it is nowadays, right? There could be a different version, a tweaked version, but not this one, because in immigration, things they do change very often. Another point of concern, Christopher, is with the minimum requirement. The minimum requirement, which is currently set in Brazilian reais, not US dollars, the current amount has been the same since 2018. So we're talking about, 7 years, 7, 8 years of an amount that has been, that should have been updated, if you will, right? Because we did a calculation another day and we could tell it should be almost double, right? So instead of 1 million reais for most of the country, nowadays it should be 1.9 million reais, not 1 million reais. Okay, so, if you think about the current federal administration, like they are trying to raise money from every single place, right? There is an ongoing battle, between the Brazilian federal government and the Brazilian Congress in terms of approving increasing in the taxation brackets for financial transactions. So they are pretty much, taking whatever they can to increase the revenues. And, guess what? Maybe if you increase, the minimum requirement for the real estate investor visa in Brazil from 1 million to 1.5 million, like maybe you don't need to double necessarily, but, maybe they would, guess what? Have more money to do the things they want to do. So I would say eventually the Brazilian government is going to update those things. And if they update, then, like this, a checkpoint that you are pursuing, it could, either change or becoming, higher or, further away from your reach, if you will. All right, Ari, I meant to specify Brazilian residency under real estate investment. Got it, Ari. Yes, got it. So that's an interesting type of residency because it's not something temporary or quick to lose as the digital nomad. It is something that is going to put you on track for the permanent residency. But our understanding, Ari, is that the first 4 years, they are still not a permanent residency, right? So most probably, if you try to secure regular employment under the first 4 years, which are temporary, you're not going to be able to secure employment. You're not going to be able to become the legal representative of your own entity, and you're not going to be able to do other things that only a permanent resident could. Okay, now this said, just like I told you guys before during this live, there are exceptions. Brazil is somewhat accommodating, and I was told by a client who was trying to migrate from the digital nomad to the real estate investor that he was able to open a Brazilian entity by himself. Right? He was not supposed to do that, and he knew. He told me, "Listen, you're not gonna believe it. Like I applied, just to learn like the ropes here to see how it works to set up an entity, so I could do it in the future when I would be authorized." And guess what? They gave me the entity, and it was very surprising because typically the Brazilian trade boards, which operate on a state level, they are good to spot paperwork of immigrants who should not be able to start a company. But he was able to get it done. And so, just like that, Ari, it's not unheard of, people who are under the temporary residency working on a full-time basis to someone. Because typically the Ministry of Work, as long as you are recorded as a fully fledged employee, meaning that your employer is paying like dozens of obligations they are going to have with you as an employee. Guess what? The Ministry of Work, of Employment, is going to say, listen, I don't care. I mean, like everything is being paid from an employment perspective. If you are not allowed to work, not my problem. All right. So that's how it may work, right? I'm not going to tell you that's how it's going to work, because there is typically this kind of, lack of a perfect harmony between the different ministries and the different parts of the, government machinery, if you will. Michael Jean, I'm here to stay. I got a 2-year residency. I want to bring my 2 kids that are back home in Haiti. Any suggestions? I was thinking about applying for a student visa or for them and go from there. Michael, so your 2-year residency, what type of residency is this? Because typically, right, like when you have a residency in Brazil, you could think about the family reunification visa. Okay, now something that happens in Haiti, Michael, is that, and you probably know what I'm gonna say here, but the Brazilian embassy, I think, is in Porto Principe, something like this, which is maybe the capital of Haiti. Listen, they are out there to deny pretty much every single application that comes their way. Okay, so they are out there, to deny your application. Okay, and maybe you know that already, right? Maybe I'm not telling you anything new, but we know from experience that whenever people are going to apply from Haiti to digital nomad, or to the a visa, the Brazilian embassy, they are going to be trying to find a reason to deny your application. Okay, I'm not criticizing. I'm just stating what we see based on our experience. Right. This is probably because of the large influx of Haitians to Brazil. There is actually or there was, like we haven't checked it recently, there was a track for people to apply for residency as long as they would have a close relative already living in Brazil. Now, I don't recall living in Brazil under a specific protected status or not, but there is such track. All right, Michael. But typically, for you to apply from Haiti, it's an uphill battle, right? If you will. Okay. Ahmed, for the permanent residency through childbirth, I understand that one needs to spend the majority of 1 year required in Brazil. What if my job entails lots of traveling? Would leaving my wife and kids in Brazil help? Ahmed, the maximum period of time that you could leave Brazil would be for 3 months. Brazil typically does not allow an exception, right? Like the Portuguese government nowadays, just like you said, if you have like a need to work abroad, if you have an emergency, you need to go abroad and stay there for health reasons. Typically, the Portuguese government, they are gonna be accommodating, not Brazil, right? In Brazil, they say, listen, I'm giving you a shot of getting citizenship in just a single year. Like, I'm not gonna put up with exceptions, with excuses. You gotta be here for this 1 year, all right? And Ahmed, in theory, everybody should be in Brazil. If your child and wife they move out of Brazil, in theory, you should not qualify for the citizenship, okay? Because the whole purpose of giving you first the permanent residency and then the citizenship is so you can, participate in your child's upbringing, right? So if they fly away, if you fly away, if you're not together, typically Brazil is going to deny you any additional benefit if they can tell so, all right? Okay, Donna Lee. Hey, Donna, it has been a while. Good to see you over here. Hello, Donna. Let me check. It is the same Donna that I think it is a Donna who's enjoying the south of Brazil, baby. Just let me know, Donna, and share with us how has been your experience so far. Windy days. Is there a number of days you have to stay in Brazil if you get a retirement visa? Is it possible to go back and forth to the US? Windy, first thing, yes, you can travel as frequent and as much as you want to the US. Up to now, we haven't identified a minimum statutory number of days that you need to stay in Brazil. So typically, our recommendation to our clients is going to be, like for you to renew a retirement, a residency, it should make sense from a common sense perspective, right? Like meaning, if you're not staying in Brazil, why would they renew your retirement residency, right? The whole point of giving you the retirement residency in the first place is for you to stay in Brazil and spend your retirement funds in Brazil. So if you're not doing any of those things, I think that the interpretation from the Brazilian immigration is that you don't need or you should not qualify for a renewal. All right. So now, again, from our experience, we never had a client who were denied, like, well, you haven't stayed in Brazil for 6 months, and therefore we're not going to renew. We haven't seen something like this. But again, there are always updates to the Brazilian immigration framework, and not every update is shared through the regulations that we follow. So there is always the possibility that this is going to be the case, and therefore, like better, it would be better for you to be more conservative in terms of staying in Brazil for a meaningful period of time, if you will. All right. Bill, come on, viewers, 16 watching, only 8 likes. Hit that thumbs up button. Thank you, Bill. Yes, if you are enjoying this live stream, do us a favor, go out there and yes, click on the like button. And this is good for our business, yes, and it's good for other people just like you to find the content. So I appreciate, Bill. Thank you for the heads up. Thank you for all of you who are liking our live stream. Like, follow our channel for more. And yes, there you go. Yui, everyone liked the video. Thank you, Yui. Donna, was hard to accept electric and water together. Yeah, there you go, Donna. Yes, exactly. For us Brazilians, I mean, it's just natural, right? Like I grew up with electrical shower heads. Okay, now for foreign citizens, it's kind of scary, particularly like in Brazil, it's very common for people to hire like a handyman to come and do the installation of the shower head. And handymans, they are not all equal, right? Like some of them they are better than others, and some people they are going to come and they are going to do something with the wiring, and then you're going to have a piece of electrical wiring exposed, believe it or not. And then when you take one of those long shower sessions, and then there is a kind of mist, the mist is going to combine with the unwrapped wire, and then you're gonna kind of smell like a burnt type of smell. And that's very typical in Brazil, and it just shows like how culture is, right? Like I mean, depending on the culture, you're gonna accept things that would never be that would never exist somewhere else, like in the United States. But again, the electrical shower heads, they are just part of the Brazilian culture. Okay, Yui, Dana, Lee, sounds like safety hazard. That's for sure, Yui. No denial, all right? Yui, is it easy to change name after marriage or even without it in Brazil? If you would like Brazilian sound name to integrate nicely into society. Very interesting question, Yui. And yes, so just like in the United States, right, when you are applying for citizenship, Brazil is going to give you a one-time opportunity for you to change your name, right? And it gotta make sense. It cannot be like crazy names. So there are some rules to what you can pick as your new name, but particularly for people coming like from the Middle East or people coming from Asia, coming from people coming from, let's say, from Russia. Brazil is going to understand that maybe your name is not going to function well in Brazil. So they are going to give you an opportunity for you to pick a new name. It could be like an English name or a Portuguese name, right? Like it is typical in Brazil. But yes, you're going to have an opportunity to do so, and that's actually part of the citizenship or naturalization application paperwork. All right. Yes, Yuri. Good question. Hermon, hello, Luciano and chat room. Hermon, it has been a while. Good to see you over here. Donna, yes, it is me. Things are good. Had my first winter birthday ever. All right. How is your winter going, Donna? I think, if I'm not mistaken, that we spoke about winter in the south of Brazil before, very particular, right? But I think that Dana has done her, homework and bought a property with heating. But I did share, it has been a while, but I did share here in our channel about a trip I had, to the south of Brazil, like Rio Grande do Sul state, and that was in the 90s, right? And I went there to visit a friend. I was supposed to stay for a week. And on my third day, I said, listen, enough is enough. I'm going to come back to Sao Paulo because, I couldn't stand the temperature. It was, around 0 Celsius, so maybe I think it's 34 Fahrenheit, right? And there was no heating. So, like it wouldn't matter how much clothes I would put on, I would still, feel like, I was freezing. So 3 days down the line, I said, listen, I apologize. I had planned a full week. I think I didn't tell him, that I wasn't, feeling okay in his city. I just said, there is something going on with my business in Sao Paulo. I need to return, right? But that's very typical of the south of Brazil, really, really low temperatures and many, many, many houses, they are not going to have, heating. So, again, it does not matter, the clothes that you're wearing, you're going to feel the pain, right? And tell us your experience, Donna, if that's the case, how you're dealing with this reality, if things are still the same, right? Because I'm talking about the 90s, and now, we are in 2025, so maybe, over the course of this couple of decades, things have improved. But in the 90s, like heating was more like an exception in the south of Brazil. Ahmed, thank you, Ahmed. Ahmed is buying me lunch today. Ahmed just sent us like $5 US. I really appreciate Ahmed. Thank you so much. Thanks for answering my questions. I initially asked about the time needed to process PR, but didn't specify the route. I meant the childbirth PR. Yes, Ahmed. So, like for the childbirth, typically is going to be like we like to start working with applicants before they leave their country of origin. But because of the pregnancy situation, typically they are going to need to travel before, way before, like the due date, and that creates some challenges, right? One challenge is going to be the apostilled criminal records. right? So if you get the criminal records and you travel to Brazil, let's say once your wife is like 6 months pregnant, that means the background check when it's time for you to apply is no longer valid, right? Because the background check for the application must be not older than 90 days, right? So there are several logistics challenges when we're talking about childbirth. But in terms of our work, typically is going to last like for 4 or 5 months. All right. So, typically we start working still before, the person leaves their country of origin. We start with, advisory. Many times they hire our service so they know exactly which documents they're going to need. And then like they work on as much as they can. There are some very important warnings, right? Like, I mean, typically if you're coming from the Arab Emirates, if you're coming from Asia, if you're coming from Africa, if you try to validate your documents at the Brazilian embassy, they are going to know you're trying to immigrate to Brazil through childbirth, and they are going to cancel any visas that you have. Or if you don't have any visas, they are going to make sure you don't get any. All right. So there are many nuances to this immigration pathway. But typically, 4 to 5 month period of time is how long it's going to take you to secure the permanent residency. And then after you secure the permanent residency, you need to remain in Brazil under the permanent residency for a year. And then you have, in theory, those 3 months, for occasional trips outside of Brazil. All right, Ahmed, thank you again for my lunch. Very happy with the $5 that Ahmed sent me. Indy says thank you, Indy, for participating. I hope you show up again, Windy. Samir has been a while. How long does it take to dissolve the stable union? Samir, typically, if you go to a registry, you could just file a new deed for dissolving the união estável, right? But this is going to depend on the agreement of both parties, okay? Because many people, right? Like, I mean, they go fast and they get a união estável done. And then 1 year down the line, 2 years down the line, they say, well, I don't need the união estável anymore. And then they go to their party. The party says, well, not so fast. Now, I believe with you. You'll be paying my bills. I'm not going to sign any document. Okay. And then you may be stuck into a união estável that is not necessarily paper based, right? There is união estável, which is set up officially through a deed, and that could be terminated through another deed. And there is the other type of união estável, which is claimed by one of the parties, right? So let's say if you are in Brazil, you're living with a Brazilian national for a couple of years, and you never filed anything, and then after this couple of years, you kind of the relationship ends. At the Brazilian party, they could file a claim even though you never got any official paperwork. They could go to a court and say, you know what, I had a união estável with John because we've been living, 2 months in this relationship. He was paying my bills. I was cooking for him every now and then. He would travel abroad and he would come back and stay here with me. And we have união estável, right? That would be a claim-based união estável. And judges in Brazil, they're pretty fast to accept claims for união estável. Okay, it wasn't the case in the past. Like in the past, there would be some common sense type of requirements, like to be living together, to be in this relationship for a few years. We don't have those minimum requirements anymore, right? So pretty much, judges are going to make up their minds based on the specifics of a case, and that's how it works. All right, so we are arriving at the end of today's live stream. I want to thank you, all of you, for participating. Very interesting participations. Indeed, I want to say thank you, for the likes. The likes are important to our channel. you know, throughout the month of July, like for the second half of July, we're not gonna have live streams on Sunday, right? It's like summer, and you know, it's like in Brazil, it's not summer. Brazil is winter, but it's still like for us, it's like when we have our, you know, our break. So I want to enjoy some of these Sundays with my family. So I'm not gonna be participating in the live streams during the Sundays until August. Like in August, we're gonna get back to the Sunday live streams, but we are keeping our Wednesday live streams. Okay, so we're gonna have our next live stream is gonna be 7 days from now, right? It should be when is it? Is it like the 23rd, right? The 23rd. So we are together again the 23rd. And remember, if you have like a pending topic of your interest to be discussed, what you can do, come to our YouTube channel, go to the live section of our channel, and you're gonna see that the 23rd live session is already scheduled over there. And if you click on notify me, guess what? You're gonna receive a notice, and then you're not gonna forget to join us for this live stream. So thank you all. Wishing you a blessed rest of your Wednesday.